Pokemon's stats are the bedrock of every Pokemon battle, but they can be a lot. Base stat, natures, EVs, IVs, so many numbers.
Why is it so complicated? I thought this was a kid's game.
Don't worry, I'm here to help. In this video, I'll explain how Pokemon stats work so you can use that knowledge to take on others in competitive battles, or just make your Pokemon stronger in playthroughs. The 6 Pokemon stats every Pokemon has are HP, short for hit points, not health points. I remember getting indignant about that as a kid, and sometimes as an adult. Attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. Every individual Pokemon has 6 specific numbers in their summary, one for each of these 6 stats. But what do the numbers actually do? Speed is the simplest one. The Pokemon with the highest speed stat moves first on any specific turn. If there are more than 2 Pokemon in a battle, like in a double battle, the Pokemon move in speed order, highest to lowest. You'd like to be able to move first and KO the enemy Pokemon before they can move at all, so generally higher speed is better. But not always. Trick Room changes the turn order from lowest to highest speed, so slower is better there. Additionally, abilities activate in speed order. So if 2 weather-setting Pokemon hit the field at the same time, the faster one's weather activates first, then the slower one's, overriding the first one. So slower weather setters are often better. The other 5 stats factor into this complicated formula for determining how much damage any specific Pokemon attack does. This calculation runs every single time an attack happens. Now I know this looks insane, but all the stuff after the parentheses are modifiers, like type effectiveness, critical hits, weather, randomness rolls, since an attack doesn't always do the exact same amount of damage, and some other hyper-specific ones. But for the stat piece of things, we really only need to look at the parentheses. Damage is the raw number of HP the attack will do. So 2 Pokemon with identical everything except HP will take the exact same number of damage, but the one with more HP will effectively lose a smaller percentage of its health. For example, if an attack will do 20 HP of damage, a 100 HP Pokemon will live with 80% of its HP left. A 10 HP Pokemon is knocked out in 1 hit. Level is the level of the Pokemon. Surprise. Higher level Pokemon hit harder not only because they have higher raw stats, but because their actual level matters in damage calculation. Level will of course vary throughout a playthrough, but in the official competitive format, every Pokemon's level is set to 50, which means this part of the equation simplifies to 22. Power is the power of the move used. For example, Earthquake is 100. But then A and D cover the remaining 4 stats. If the move used is physical, A is the user's attack stat, and D is the target's defense stat. If the move used is special, A is the user's special attack, while D is the target's special defense stat. Prior to Diamond and Pearl, the type of the move determined whether it was physical or special. All rock moves were physical, all water special, etc. Since Gen 4 though, each individual damaging move is denoted physical or special based on the move's, lore, for lack of a better word? Like, what is the Pokemon physically doing when it's using the move? Hit with object or body part? Physical. Blast with beam or magic or elemental energy? Special. Another way to generally describe the difference is physical is melee and special is ranged. But that is a generalization. There is a mechanic called contact, whether a move touches the target, and not all physical moves make contact. But we don't need to get into all the intricacies of that here. We got enough intricacies to cover. Because level, power, and A are all in the numerator, that's the word for the top of the fraction, in case you forgot, they all increase damage. So the higher those are, the more damage is done. A is divided by D though, so of course a higher defense or special defense cuts down on the impact of the attacking attack or special attack. Then of course more HP means the damage done has less of an impact, and the higher speed means you get to go first. In short, the higher each of the stats are, the better. There are exceptions, like what I discussed earlier with speed, but in the vast majority of situations, bigger number, better Pokemon. Also, I did say we could ignore all the battle scenario modifiers, but I am going to discuss in-battle stat modifiers, because this is a video about stats. During battle, all stats but HP can be raised or lowered by abilities or moves or items. Some of them will do kind of an invisible boost, like the Choice Band gives you a 50% attack boost that can't really be changed unless the item is removed. But a lot of them change the stage of the stat. What's happening here is a simple multiplier for that stat. The A and D values, plus speed separately, are being changed. It's just that the precise amount isn't clear most of the time. In-battle modifiers range from -6 to +6, but those refer to stages, not additions or subtractions from the stat value. How it works is that you always start at stage 0, where your multiplier is 2/2, which is 1, so nothing changes. But for every stage boosted over 0, you add 1 to the numerator. So +2 is 4/2, so a ×2 multiplier. One use of Swords Dance doubles your attack. A stat can be boosted all the way to +6, 8/2, thus quadrupling the stat. But if the stage is lowered below 0, you don't subtract from the numerator, you'd hit 0 at -2. So you instead add to the denominator, the bottom of the fraction. So with 1 Intimidate, you cut the enemy Pokemon to -1 attack, moving from 2/2 to 2/3. Cutting the stat to 66.6% of what it was. This minimizes at -6, 2/8, 1/4 the original value. In games where you can view during battle information, you can see how many stages up or down a Pokemon's stats are. Side note, I should mention accuracy and evasion. These are temporary in-battle stats that work differently, and as you can see from this chart, are significantly more complicated. They also interact with each other, so it's accuracy stage minus evasion stage, but they still cap at +6 or -6. And then the end multiplier is applied to the move accuracy to get a new chance to hit. Not true stats, because they're temporary, but since they're called stats, I figured I'd give them a quick mention. So then what determines the number value of a specific Pokemon's specific stat? How exactly do they get those numbers in their summaries? Well, again, it's complicated formulas. HP has a separate formula from the other 5 stats, but with the exception of nature, which cannot affect HP, both formulas have the same variables: base, IV, EV, and level. Then the non-HP stats have nature. I will cover each of these terms individually. Level is, again, the level of the Pokemon. 1 to 100, you know this one. But clearly, it's very important because it affects both stat and damage calculations. Base is the base stat for that species. If you've ever heard someone, like me, talk about a base stat or a base stat total, this is what they're talking about. Every Pokemon species has a different base stat spread. For example, all Charizards have 78 HP, 84 attack, 78 defense, etc. Unfortunately, base stats aren't really made clearly visible in any Pokemon game, not even Champions. You'll get some loose graphics that generally estimate them, but to get precise values, you have to look online. Evolved form Pokemon are usually stronger than their unevolved forms because the base stats are higher, thus making the final stats higher since base is in the numerator of the equation. A base stat total, all 6 base stats added together, is never used in any battle calculations. Instead, it's just a simplified way to generally measure a Pokemon's overall strength. There are lots of factors that determine how useful a Pokemon is, like moveset, type, abilities, etc. But generally, a base stat total 680 legendary is a better and stronger Pokemon than a base stat total 195 Caterpie. Base stats range from 1 up to well over 200. The highest individual base stat is Blissey's 255 HP, but this could always be usurped in the future. By the way, if you're ever looking at like online base stat total charts, Eternamax Eternatus is gonna be at the top and it does not count. It is not usable by the player. They just coded it that way to make it work for the boss fight. It is not the strongest Pokemon. It's coded to be a raid boss. Generally, if a base stat is over 100, it's pretty good. Pokemon Database color codes the base stats when looking at a specific Pokemon, so that can help you get an idea for how good a Pokemon species' particular base stat is.
Haha! It is I, Grunty Boy, and I am enraged! I just found out that money in a savings account can earn you money! By just sitting there!
Yes! You didn't know that?
The Hideout financial literacy classes leave a lot to be desired. They're mainly just take money from other people. But anyways, my savings account is earning me basically nothing, while I know others are earning much more.
That's right. You should switch to Chime, the sponsor of this video and America's #1 choice for banking. Chime's high-yield savings account earns 3.75% APY.
APY? What is APY?
Annual percentage yield. How much of what's in the account you earn per year.
Oh, so me want uppy appy.
Technically, yes, but I hated how you said that. But anyways, that APY is 9 times the national average of 0.39%. So if you have, let's say, $5,000 in your savings account, then you can do the math.
No, I can't.
Okay, never mind, guess I will. 0.39% of 5,000 is just around $20 per year, but 3.75% is $187. That's $168 extra, more than enough for a new Switch game. In fact, I think that's 2. Plus, with savings tools like goal setting and automation, Chime can help you reach your financial goals. And with the Chime Card, you can also get 5% cash back in a category of your choice, like gas, groceries, or dining.
Oh, nice! I'll earn cash back on things I already spend on.
Sign up for Chime now using my link in the description below. Right now, you can get a $100 bonus with a new checking account, exclusively through my link. Plus, you get your paycheck up to 2 days early with direct deposit.
Sweet! I'll do that now and get my uppy appy.
You must stop.
Fair. Ta-ta!
Next is nature. Since Gen 3, every individual Pokemon, not species, has a nature. So 2 Caterpies caught right after one another are likely to have different ones. Natures affect certain things like food flavor preference, but their biggest impact is on the non-HP stats. There are 25 natures, and 20 boost one stat and lower another. Lonely boosts attack but lowers defense. Sassy boosts special defense and lowers speed, etc. The last 5, hardy, docile, bashful, quirky, and serious, don't affect any stats. Well, I guess technically they boost and lower the same stats, so a net effect of nothing. So they are called the neutral natures. The numerical boost or drop natures apply is 10% up or down. Nature is the final variable in the equation, so if the nature negatively affects that stat, the value is 0.9. If it boosts the stat, it's 1.1. So 2 Pokemon with everything identical except their nature could have significantly varying stat values. Of all the natures though, there are some that you will hear discussed a lot more often because they're better. The most popular natures are ones that lower the attacking stat a Pokemon is not using. For example, a Machamp has base 130 attack, while only base 65 special attack, half as good. Plus, it learns far more physical moves, so most Machamp aren't going to use their special attack. Therefore, Adamant, Impish, Careful, and Jolly are the best natures for it, since those allow you to boost a stat it will use while dropping the one stat it's never going to use. The most popular natures for special attackers, therefore, tend to be bold, modest, calm, and timid, since they all lower the Pokemon's physical attack. Brave, quiet, relaxed, and sassy natures lower speed, so they find use on Trick Room teams, since lower speed is the goal. The neutral natures can find use in the rare cases where a Pokemon uses both its attack and special attack, called a mixed attacker. But the natures that lower defense or special defense are almost never used intentionally. For many years, the nature that your Pokemon came with is what it was stuck with. But in the more recent games, you can change a Pokemon's nature by using a Nature Mint, or by using VP in Champions. Using a Nature Mint just changes the Pokemon's stats though, which sounds silly to say because that's the most important part, but there are other pieces that it doesn't mess with, like what nature it could pass down to its offspring, or what form of toxicity your Toxel will evolve into, or what food preferences it has. So just keep that in mind if you're doing more cooking than battling. With level, base, and nature covered, there are only 2 variables in the stat formula left, IV and EV. These are the most complicated though. So let's start with the easier one, IVs. IV stands for individual value. The individual piece refers to the fact that every individual Pokemon, not species, but every guy, has a unique set of IVs. Assuming you don't take any methods to predetermine them, we'll get to some of those. So if you catch 2 of the same species of Pokemon in a row, their sets of IVs will almost certainly be completely different from each other. Think of them like a Pokemon's genetics. They are born with them and they cannot be changed. At least, they couldn't for a while. We will also get to that. A Pokemon has a total of 6 IVs, 1 for each of the 6 stats. Those IVs range in value from 0 to 31. Why to 31? A random sounding number? I don't know. I'm not a game programmer, but that's what it is. The IV value in the stat determination formulas is on the top, which means higher IV, better stat. And these have a significant impact. The exact numerical impact will vary, but at level 50, the difference in stat value between 0 IV and 31 IV is around 15 stat points. This has less of an impact on higher stats, but for lower stats, like Gardevoir's defense, going from 31 to 0 is a loss of almost 20%. Competitive battlers almost always want their Pokemon to have perfect 31 IVs in HP, defense, and special defense, so they can take hits as well as possible. There are exceptions, but they are very niche. The main exception I'm aware of involves Belly Drum, which halves your HP in exchange for maxing your attack to +6. And the Citrus Berry, which heals you at or below 50% HP. If your max HP is odd, let's say 101, Belly Drum cuts your HP to 51, since it cuts half rounded down. That's above 50%, so Citrus Berry won't activate, so you're vulnerable. If your HP is even though, like 100, Belly Drum cuts it to 50, exactly 50%. So Citrus Berry will activate immediately after Belly Drum. So there are times where you would use a 30 IV in HP to get a slightly lower HP to make something like this work. But most of the time, you just want the 31, and also you can accomplish a similar thing using EVs. We'll get to those too. Competitive players also usually want 31 speed, unless you want to be slow for Trick Room, in which case you want 0. Additionally, the highest level players will sometimes use lower speed IVs in order to underspeed specific meta threats to have something intentionally happen later. Wolfie has done this before, and that's like the highest level it gets. World champ difference, baby. Physical attackers want a perfect attack IV and don't care about special attack, while special attackers want a perfect special attack IV and ideally 0 attack to minimize any damage they do to themselves in confusion, because that actually looks at the confused Pokemon's own attack and defense stats. However, big news, competitive players don't actually get a choice anymore. At least if they're playing officially and not on Showdown. Pokemon Champions removed IVs entirely, calculating all stats of all Pokemon as if all IVs were 31. So if you're playing competitive in Champions, then IVs don't matter. But if you're playing competitive on Showdown, or you want the best chance of winning in one of the mainline game battle facilities, then IVs do matter. So I'm gonna tell you how to get the IVs you want. In Showdown, type it in. Nice. In the mainline games, without plugging your Pokemon's stats into an online calculator, there is not a way to know the exact IVs of your Pokemon unless they are 0, 30, or 31. You can know the range of most by using the Judge feature, introduced in Gen 7 and unlocked as a PC function at some point, usually post-game. The word description it gives you tells you the range of the IV, and those are displayed on screen here. Prior to Gen 7 though, you had to consult specific NPCs with all kinds of different phrasings for overall total and specific stats. It's still obnoxious that they don't just tell you the precise number with the Judge feature, but at least it's better than it used to be. When a Pokemon is generated, IVs are determined randomly with some exceptions. Legendary, Mythical, and Ultra Beasts are guaranteed 3 perfect IVs from Gen 6 onward. Terra Raid Pokemon are also guaranteed some, with more guaranteed the higher star level the raid. 1 and 2 star raids have 1 perfect, then 1 extra for each star level, with the special 7-star raids having all perfect IVs. There are other ways to predetermine or alter IVs though. The easiest and most straightforward, at least in Gen 9, is Hyper Training. Hyper Training allows you to use bottle caps, to change your Pokemon's IVs to be perfect, 31. A silver bottle cap does 1 stat, and gold turns all of them perfect. It was introduced in Sun and Moon, and until Scarlet and Violet, your Pokemon annoyingly had to be level 100. Thankfully now it's only 50, much more reasonable and accessible. However, I should note that much like Nature Mints, Hyper Training doesn't actually change the IV. It changes how it's checked in battle. This matters for breeding. For a long time, breeding perfect Pokemon through a complex inheritance system involving various held items and often a perfect 31 IV Ditto was necessary to get usable competitive Pokemon. But thanks to Nature Mints, level 50 Hyper Training, and the Mirror Herb, allowing for egg moves to be learned after hatching, breeding for perfect Pokemon became far less important in Scarlet and Violet, unless you wanted a specific IV under 31. And now with champions, IVs are gone? So I'm not gonna be diving into the intricacies of Pokemon breeding in this video. Maybe another time. With IVs covered, this leaves just one variable in the stat equation: EVs. If IVs are a Pokemon's genetics, EVs are a Pokemon's upbringing and training. Think nature versus nurture. Or maybe don't, because natures are actually a thing. I mean, well, okay, nurture is very clearly just EVs, but then nature is both IVs and natures. But at least nature is within nature, so I guess maybe you can't. EV stands for effort value, indicating that Pokemon gain them by putting in effort. All obtainable Pokemon have 0 when first created, and every time a Pokemon gains experience from a battle, the Pokemon gains effort values, EVs, in specific stats based on the species they defeated. For example, beating faster Pokemon gives your Pokemon speed EVs, making your Pokemon faster. Beating defensive Pokemon makes yours more defensive, etc. 2 notes, auto battles in Scarlet and Violet do not provide EVs, even though they do provide experience. And the other note is that level 100 Pokemon cannot gain experience, but since Gen 5, they do still gain EVs in situations where they would gain experience from a battle. So that's the simplest way to explain EVs. When we get into the numbers though, it's quite a bit more complicated than IVs, but I will do my best to make this clear. The specific EVs a Pokemon gains when gaining experience depends on the species of Pokemon defeated. Psyduck gives 1 special attack EV. Graveler gives 2 defense EVs. Raichu gives 3 speed EVs. It's always a total of 1, 2, or 3, but it can be spread across multiple stats. For example, Vibrava gives you 1 attack and 1 speed. Every time a Pokemon accrues 4 EVs in a specific stat, it gains 1 point for that stat when the Pokemon is level 100. Let's look at the formula again. You can see EV over 4 right here, so 4 EVs equates to 1 stat point, but it's multiplied by the level. All of these terms are. So we can write this out a little differently. I took out the +5 and the nature part because they're not relevant to this part of the equation, but level over 100 is being multiplied by these 3 terms, which can then extrapolate out like this, So L over 100 times EV over 4. If L is 100, then this is just 1, and it cancels and it goes away. Thus, 1 stat point per 4 EVs, but only if the level is 100. However, if the level is 50, like it is in the official competitive format, we get this, which simplifies to EV over 8. So it's 8 EVs per stat point at level 50. Except for the first one. The first 4 EVs at level 50 give you 1 stat point, and then it's 8 EVs for every stat point after that. If your IV is odd, it's crazy. I know I didn't design this, but I will explain. So if you have 4 EVs at level 50, this looks like it should give you half of a stat point, which is not possible, and when that happens, it's rounded down. But IV is also multiplied by level over 100. So with a perfect 31 IV, this is 15.5, which gets you to 16. Thus, these 4 EVs, if they're not there, this isn't here, this is just 15, so there's the 1 extra point from just the 4 EVs. But then if you have 8 total EVs, this becomes 1, but this is still 15.5, which is 16.5, but it rounds down, so it's still 16. To get up to 17, this has to be 12. So it's 4 for the first one, 8 for each additional one. EVs have a limit. A Pokemon can only have 510 in total, after which they will not gain any more. 510 is a strange choice because it's not divisible by 4. So like 2 EVs always go to waste. Again, there's a lot of pieces of this, I just don't understand the decision making. Additionally, you can only put 252 into one specific stat. Prior to Gen 6, you could actually put 255 into one stat, but 3 EVs would go to waste since 255 is not divisible by 4. So in Gen 6, they made it so the practical cap is the actual cap. Per stat, not total. 510, there's still the 2 that do nothing. By contributing EVs, you can add 127 stat points in total across all the stats at level 100. With a max of 63 stat points to a specific stat. That's extremely significant, considering level 100 fully evolved stats will often be between 150 and 300 before EVs. So a Pokemon with maxed EVs is much stronger than one without any. A simple common EV spread is 252 to one, 252 to another, and 4 to a third. But these can be much more complex. Champions simplifies how EVs are presented, and actually makes a small change. Rather than dealing with the 510 EVs, it simplifies things down to just the raw stat points you can add, 66 total. One stat can have up to 32. Remember how at level 50, the first 4 EVs give you a stat point, then it's 8 EVs per stat point after? The first 4 give you 1, and there's 248 left over, and that divided by 8 is 31. 32, max, points to 1 stat at level 50. However, in the previous systems, maxing 2 stats leaves 6 EVs left over, only 4 of which can be used. Thus 1 more stat point to a non-max stat at level 50. But 32 plus 32 plus 1 is 65, not 66 like it is in Champions. So they added 1. It seems that instead of removing the 2 dud EVs, they added 2, giving you 4 more to spend on another stat point. I think this is a weird decision. I think it would have been simpler to just cut the fat of the extra 2, like they don't exist. But by adding the 2, then that makes it so if you take your 8 EVs and you put 1 into each stat, that's 2 total points. But if you put those 8 EVs into the same stat, like we discussed earlier, it's still only 1. So they had to add an extra stat point to account for the extra EVs when they could have just cut the EVs. I'm sorry, I'm getting into the weeds of an already very overgrown topic. The stat points in Champions are a simplification of EVs. By the way, if you're in the game and you're wondering what these orange bars are, those only appear if the stat is impacted by the nature. Due to the 0.9 or 1.1 multiplier affecting the math, these mark when you get 2 stat points for the price of 1. If you're putting EVs into a boosted stat, I don't know why you would put EVs into a stat you're lowering. The traditional mechanics of EVs can and will matter outside champions though, especially since you can save on VP by EV training your Pokemon in the mainline games, then transferring them in. So, how do you EV train a Pokemon? Like so many other pieces of this, monitoring the EVs will be tough. For a long time, like with IVs, there was no way to see what EVs any of your Pokemon had in-game, outside of getting an effort ribbon if you maxed them. Starting in Gen 6 though, you could see a graph indicating a general amount of EVs in a particular stat that a Pokemon had. The games have maintained that, and in Scarlet and Violet, when you max the EVs for a stat, it sparkles, and when you max all of them, it turns blue. To get precise values though, beyond just maxed, you're gonna need a calculator or to keep track of what you fight. Speaking of what you fight, let's say you want to EV train a Flutter Mane and max its special attack and speed. You could battle 252 Psyducks, then 252 Fletchling. Or you could do something else. The Gen 6 games have super training and the Alola games have passive EV training on Poképelago, but we left the 3DS behind a while ago. Prior to Scarlet and Violet, you could have it hold the Macho Brace, which halves the holder's speed while held, but doubles all EVs gained from battle. But that's not in the newest games. Pokerus, the beneficial virus, also doubles EV gain, but again, it is not present in Scarlet and Violet. The vitamins and feathers simply give you EVs when used on a Pokemon, 10 per vitamin or 1 per feather. Vitamins used to not work after a Pokemon had 100 EVs in a stat though. Thankfully, that's not true anymore. So I could give the Flutter Mane 25 Calcium, 25 Carbos, 2 Genius Feathers, and 2 Swift Feathers. But that's really expensive. Like, the vitamins are like almost 10,000 Poké-Dollars each. My preferred way, and I believe the most reasonable and accessible way in the modern games, is to use the power items. A Pokemon holding a power item has its speed halved, like the Macho Brace, but in exchange, every time it gains EVs, it gains 8 additional EVs for the stat the item corresponds to. This happens no matter what Pokemon it defeats. It's always 8 extra in that stat. So if you give your Flutter Mane the Power Lens and battle Psyduck, that means you get 9 special attack EVs per battle instead of just 1. So you only have to battle 28 to max its special attack. Then you can swap to the Anklet and battle 28 Fletchling, and you've maxed your speed. Then you just grab 4 EVs and another stat very easily, and boom, EV trained Flutter Mane. It's a lot trickier if you want to do something more complicated than just maxing 2 stats, because you really do have to just keep track of the specific Pokemon that you fight. However, if you're watching this video, you're probably not designing EV spreads to tank a specific hit from a specific meta threat. But even if you are, thankfully, if you screw up during your EV training, you can fix your mistake. Starting in Emerald, the Pomeg, Kelpsie, Qualot, Hondu, Greppa, and Tomato berries became the EV reducing berries. They will remove 10 EVs from the corresponding stat for each one consumed, like anti-vitamins. So if you get too many in the wrong stat, you feed it a couple of the berries and you remove them. But keep in mind, these also boost friendship. So if you're trying to just like remove all of them from one stat, it'll tell you you can use more than you actually can, because even after you've zeroed out the EVs, it's having an effect on friendship. So to EV train a Pokemon, you gotta spend VP or spend some time and keep track of unclear numbers. Pick your EV training poison. This has been Pokemon Stats Explained. Use this knowledge to climb the competitive ladder, take on the battle tower, or just have a deeper understanding of the game. And if you ever forget any of the intricacies, just try to remember, bigger number, better Pokemon. Generally. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see a similar explainer video about Pokemon type matchups, you can check out my video about that here.